So thank you very much. The first thing is to answer a basic question, which is basically why do we really need privileged access management? The response is very simple. Privilege management is important because of the increasingly fast transformation that is happening within all the businesses and organizations. Habits are moving, habits are changing, migration to the cloud is importantly increasing. Hybrid IT are now the norm. And the result of that is that you have more and more and more privileged users within all organizations. And when you know that 80% of breaches, of successful breaches, are linked to the usage of the privileged accounts, then you understand that in order to cope with the expansion of the attack surface, which is everywhere, in order to cope with attackers which are more and more efficient, which do harm very, very quickly, you need some advanced privileged access management solutions. And those solutions are used by a lot of users, IT administrators, team workers, remote workers, contractors, partners, even developers and DevOps are involved in that. And of course, when you look at the prediction of KuppingerCole in the leadership compass, you see that the market of the PAM is expected to grow at an average growth of 20%. We start at 2.2 billion. This year, we are going more than double in 2025. Why that? Because of the digital transformation, because also of the necessity to comply with many regulations, which is very important for organizations who want to demonstrate that they have done the necessary thing to comply with the regulation and they are safe. Of course, to cope with more and more cyber crimes and so forth and so on. By the way, hackers are very well understood that the most easy to go route to attack an organization is to go via privileged accounts. So the protection of the privileged accounts is very, very important. So more and more privileged accounts, more and more assets to protect, and more privileged usages need for a global PAM solution. So regarding the vendors are increasingly enriching their offers. So they are moving from usual standard features in the PAM, vaulting, password, etc., to more high-end features like privileged users analytics. They are more and more introducing the risk approach in the solutions. And we are all working in our fields to make our PAM solutions more linked to advanced threat protections with scenarios of automation in order to cope with the most advanced situation. But the important is elsewhere. The important things is regarding the PAM challenges themselves in terms of project and deployment and adoption. We have 4 key challenges for the PAM that we look at when we are discussing with our customer, when we are deploying program with our customer. First is the deployment. Second is to work with the adoption. Third is to implement the principle of least privilege. And the fourth point is to ensure that you can cope with a fair total cost of ownership, a competitive total cost of ownership. Let's look at those challenges one by one. The first one is deployment. When we are talking about deployment, the more important thing is to be aware that you need to plan your solution, your people, well before you acquire a solution. You need to make sure that the solution that you are going to acquire will fit into your infrastructure well, easily, and you need to ensure that your processes, your PAM processes, will fit into your IT processes very well and very easily. This calls for progressive planning. And when you have done that, one of the first and important topics to do is to identify the assets, the accounts, and the owners that your PAM solutions is going to be obliged to manage in order to ensure that you have a global reach in terms of security. When you have some assets, accounts, or owners who are not identified in an organization, if you leave this, then you are almost sure that this threat will be discovered, these weaknesses will be discovered, and that threat will come to it. This is a global and complex planning process, and of course, it's better to go with some professional to accompany yourself. There are a lot of people who try to do it themselves. It's dangerous because you have a lot of things to think about and processes to implement. Let's look at that from a project principle. If you look at the solution that can address your deployment challenge, a good approach is to choose some modular solution. A solution which is able to work at the session management level without a password management level, for example. And then you start with the session management implementation. You increase with an access management in order to cope with remote access. And then you can implement password management. And you also can choose solutions that are going to have an integration with external vaults or your own vaults in order to ensure that if you have invested in the vault previously and that you want to move to another solution, you can keep your vaults and improve your solution. This goes for control project timing and implementation. With this kind of solution, you control timing. This enables also to demonstrate results very early in the process because you don't need to deploy a global solution in order to show results. Session management would be a first step, a very efficient first step. And then you can expand your offering or your project with PEDM, with endpoint. We will see that scale at the level you want, when you want, at the time you want. So again, this kind of planning calls for planning, thinking preview prior to buy the solution, and this enables you to control your implementation and to demonstrate results very quickly. Second challenge in the PAM is the adoption. Here, you need to ensure that the user are going to be using the product, using the PAM solution with not much friction. And you should expect some friction when you implement some privileged access management solution because you are going to ask your users to modify their habit. Here we are speaking about change management. We need to prepare people. We need to explain them the reason why you need to implement this privileged access management solution. And then how the solution can help you is with very, very intuitive graphical interface to ease the work of the users, not putting an additional burden on them. Progressive deployment is also a key. And again, how the solutions are going to help you with modular architectures. So if we come back to our model here, and you start with solutions which are very modular, again, you can start with session management, and then you start with the solution. You don't need to start with session and password management, for example, and you implement the session management. You control, record sessions, privileged sessions. So this enables you to be compliant. Then if you want, you can add an access manager interface in order to connect to the external world. And then you leave the project as is, working, and people are going to get used to the session management. Then in the second step, you can implement password management. And here, you are going to discuss with your users because there is the moment where you are going to change their habits because they are going to need to forget about their old password habits, and it will be much more easier because they will have been used to use the session. And then again, you can scale whenever you want. So again, coping with adoption challenges needs for modular solutions, and solutions can help you to do that very, very easy. Third challenge of the privileged access management is to implement the principle of least privilege. This principle states that in an ideal world, every user and application must be able to access only the information and resources that are necessary for its legitimate purposes. That means that you need to ensure that the right person should access the right resource at the right time and for the right purpose. What does that mean? First, as we have seen, we will have more users than ever in our infrastructure. Of course, we will keep with IT administrators privileged user management users, but also any user who has access to sensitive information can virtually be a privileged user. So this means to expand the user scope to any user who could be a PAM user. The second point, the resources. Not only are you going to implement the privilege management to servers and critical IT infrastructure assets, but also to the endpoint themselves, in order to remove the privileges and admin account from the endpoint and to secure your solutions in a more dramatic way. So the principle of least privilege is a challenge because it enriches a lot the protection, and it's important to implement it in the second step once you have a privileged access management solution. But if you combine this with a just-in-time approach, then you have a very powerful global end-to-end solution that I would like to illustrate here. Say, for example, that you have an administrator who needs access to a firewall to upgrade its firmware for 120 minutes, 2 hours. He believes that he needs the access for 2 hours. So he opens his interface and he requests the approval to the system. The approval system to the authority, whether it is a supervisor or a system that works with the privileged access management API, will tell him, okay, you have the access, but only for 60 minutes, because I know that in order to upgrade the firmware, you don't need 2 hours, but only 1 hour. So he will get access to the resource for, let's say, 60 minutes only. But when he has access to the resource, doesn't mean that he can do the firmware upgrade, because this is a very sensitive operation. So he will need to ask to another authority or the same authority the authorization to make an upgrade of this firewall firmware. And this means that the system will escalate its privileges in order to enable the administrator to do this operation. When the operation is done, then the system will remove both accesses and privileges for this user, meaning that he has no any more access to the resource. So this implementation is extremely powerful in order to grant that the right user has access to the right resource for the right purpose and for the right duration. No standing access anymore and no standing privileges. This is very important and powerful in order to implement this threat protection. The last privileged access management challenge is the total cost of ownership. When you plan a project, you need to encompass all the costs of the project and to choose solutions which will minimize the global total cost of ownership of the privileged access management. We are speaking here about setup costs and running costs, both, meaning that you need to think about it on a given duration, a given project duration. For example, the time between today and your next global upgrade or your next geographical expansion. You, of course, need to take into account the number of users that you are going to use the solution. You are going to take into account, of course, the number of the resources that you want to protect, but also the number of modules and servers that you are going to need in order to implement the solution. And also the number of environments that you want to deploy the privileged access management solution on. Production environment, pre-product environment, or testing environment. And then, of course, the price of the license and the price of the project. If we look at the various simulations that we have made, you can see here the split between the setup costs in blue, orange, and gray, license, infrastructure, and project costs, and the running costs. And you can see that this share of running costs, maintenance, administrations, is between 24% for, let's say, large, medium to large project, up to 55% for smaller projects. And this is very important to take into account in order to ensure that you are planning your total cost of ownership very carefully and that you are minimizing the total cost of the solution. When you are going to develop this knowledge and to understand the total cost of ownership methodology, you can see a lot of differences between several solutions. In our Walix simulations and our methodology, we observe some difference between 30% between different solutions because, as always, you can see differences in the running phases because of the simplicity, the different simplicity and modularity of the various solutions. So it's important to discuss with the vendors and to challenge us, to challenge our solutions, to challenge our models, and discuss with us in order to ensure that you are keeping the solution which is going to minimize your total cost of ownership on the setup and also on the running of the solution. This is almost the end of the presentation. I just would like to show you what Walix values are. So we are, as you know, probably a leader in the privileged access management solution. We have solutions which are certified at the European level. Security and privacy by design are part of our DNA. And as you have probably understood, our solutions are designed and developed to make easy the life of our customers. Walix, it will be my conclusion at a glance, is a global company with 170 plus employees, more than 1,000 customers, and more than 170 partners. We are deployed all over the world, and we serve our customers with total cost of ownership management, simplicity, and easy to use. Thank you very much.